But let's put the limelight then on defense, because that sector has been in focus given that the defense minister unveiled just recently the third list of the military systems under import restrictions. There have been a lot of steps undertaken in this vein with a boost to the defense space in Make in India. Jayant Patil is the whole-time director and senior executive vice president, defense and smart technologies at L&T. And we've also got Captain Vishal Kanwar, who is the director, Aerospace and Defence at PwC India, to discuss the same. Thank you so much for taking time out and joining in. To begin with you then, Mr. Patil, given the fact that India is the largest importer of arms with close to 11% of total global imports, we do have a critical dependency on other countries like Russia, France, Israel, and of course the United States in defense. Now that we're seeing a lot of efforts for indigenization gathering pace in the country, how are you viewing the progress that's been made?
I think we have crossed that kind of a phase where we used to be the largest importers, although we still have some amount of imports. I can only say that the current scenario, if we look at, the acquisition that the government of India today is doing is just about 1/3 coming from overseas now. So it's a complete sea change from what it used to be 6-7 years back. It used to be 65-67% used to come from outside, and the 1/3 used to be within the country. I see this budget year, it's exactly reversing. So over about 6 to 7 years, we see a complete reversal. Many steps, and lots of them today are pushing, the armed forces as well as the government of India pushing itself to buy within the country. We've seen 3 lists. The latest, of course, is what you mentioned, but there are 2 lists which were already issued out. And with these, there are nearly 310 major, I would say, platforms, systems, subsystems, the critical building blocks of any major defense systems. They're all being gradually, depending on when the industry is going to be ready, they're being put into this positive indigenization. Let's call it the embargo. Not a right word, that we are part of a global chain, but it's a positive kind of an incentive for Indian companies that if they develop something of that kind, it would not be imported, and that's a commitment from government. And that's how we see that going forward, we're going to be seeing many opportunities. Just to put a specific number, these 3 lists together is going to mean 4.5 lakh crores of opportunities, which today have already been cleared by the government for acquisition over the next 4 to 5 years.
4.5 lakh worth of opportunities over the next 5 years, and that is fairly sizable. So I just wanted to understand from you as well, Mr. Kanwar, as to how you're looking at the total of these 3 lists, the steps that have been taken by the government to boost the Make in India theme within the defense space as a whole. It has been fairly commendable.
Absolutely. And I think just to continue what Mr. Jayant just spoke about, I think in the entire defense sector, we are sitting at a very critical point where today, if I compare with the automotive industry, where it was 20 years back, and we have huge buoyancy, both from the demand side and the supply side, and the entire ecosystem, what the government is promoting in terms of the policies, whether you look at the DAP 2020 or the new DPM, which is in the offing, and these 3 lists which have come. So for me, I see 5 fundamental shifts, which is going to drive, indigenization, and even beyond these 3 lists, what will happen in the country. One is the geopolitics, as we see happening on what's happening in the Ukraine. I think that brings in the point on how we can be more localized and enhance indigenization. And to that extent, we have reduced 33% of our exports. And how do we look at enhancing focus in the defense sector? We know today about 2.4% of the global GDP is spent on defense. After what's happening in Ukraine and Azerbaijan and Armenia, the global spending has gone up in defense. Countries are hitting at 2% of their respective GDPs. In our country itself, we are around 2%, and we have about 8% of CAGR in defense budget. Good thing is capital is growing at about 12.8%. To the question which you asked, the government is made it mandatory to spend about 68% of the budget for domestic industry. There is a lot of focus on R&D which is happening, and I think that is the driver for future startups and the entire aerospace and defense ecosystem. 25% of the budget is going to be invested in R&D for startups, industries, and academics. And also the latest idea of creating a special purpose vehicle with DRDO for private industry for R&D is going to be a big thing. The other two things which I want to mention is we need to see how these big ticket items, we have Tamil Nadu Industrial Corridor coming, we have UP Industrial Corridor coming, a lot of activities happening in defense testing infrastructure scheme, creating of an ecosystem. Now, the point is, how do we get the strategic partnership going for the four things? And Mr. Jayant is also heading a couple of them. How do we make it a reality? And I think that is where we need to push. And also the government intention of shifting from the public sector to the private sector. And as consultants, which we see this, this is a very, I would say, promising way to go ahead, because at the end of the day, it is the private sector which is going to drive the aerospace and defense ecosystem. So both from the demand side and the supply side, we are poised. The governance ecosystem is both promotional as well as regulatory system is helping this entire ecosystem. I think we in about 10 to 15 years from now, I personally feel that in the non-kinetic domain, and when I talk the non-kinetic domain, this is the area of C4ISR, sensors, communication, the area of where we're looking at platform electronics. This is an area where we could perhaps be global leaders. And in the kinetic side, which is essentially hardware platforms, ships, aircraft, and tanks, etc., is something we could be ensure self reliance in this area. And another area which we could really lead in the world is in the space. And space is emerging as a new ecosystem of dominance in battlefield scenario. Today, if Ukraine is able to talk to us, it is because of space-based internet they have, which they have access to. So I think India has a huge future. Basis our capacity in talent, in IT and engineering services, in our software, to take leadership in certain areas of warfare, which are the catalysts for future winnability and for future combat power.
Correct. A few hours ago, India's Defence Minister Rajnath Singh in Washington, D.C. has said, and I quote him, "Price affordability will benefit only when we require or cannot produce. We will buy from outside when it's required." With that, Mr. Patil, I'm going to come to you. We talk of a new India. We're talking of a new India, with a lot of new ideas, becoming Atmanirbhar Bharat. But what the Defence Minister has said 2 hours ago in Washington, D.C., realistically, how far away is India from that point where it doesn't have to buy defense equipment from overseas, where it's only going to look at price affordability afterwards?
Rajnath ji is absolutely firm on what he's speaking, and this is not the first time he's speaking this. He's been on record all along talking that we believe what our industry can do. And I want to take a thread out of what Vishal just now talked about. The future is going to be led by the private enterprise. I can only tell you that exactly a decade back, the private sector's contribution in defense used to be 5% of the acquisition budget. Today, this year, it is 25%. So it's a five-fold increase already that has happened in last 5 years. And that is essentially where there's a very sizable change in the posture that the government is today taking. Anything that we can foresee on land and naval, I don't see there's any reason for government of India to import anything. And the government trusts the industry today when we say we can actually do it here. There's very sizable amount of those programs which we already are into either building, developing, or in the form of offering it to the government against their specific requirements. And this is precisely where that 4.5 lakh crores of opportunities come in. One area where we have, I would say, dependent still quite sizably is on the aircrafts, fighter aircrafts and helicopters and things like that. And you see a sea change in the way HAL has actually built its capabilities in last about a decade. And we have seen that instead of a repeat being opted for the MMRCA, government has gone ahead and acquired very sizable number, 89 numbers of the fighters out of the LCA. Now, the LCA Tejas actually marks a typically 50,000 crore kind of a contract, which was unthinkable some years back within the country. And of course, there's a Mark II, and thereafter, of course, there's a AMCA, which is in pipeline. The performance of the Indian industry as a result over next 2 to 3 years is what is going to be deciding whether in that one particular domain we are going to retain some amount of foreign dependence. Obviously, on the building blocks for the aircraft, typically like the aero engine, we still are dependent. And we need to be taking very specific actions to build the aircraft engines right in this country. But for that, I don't see there's anything in a fighter aircraft that today Indian industries can't really be doing. And this is essentially where we need to start looking at the new India in terms of our aspirations to do things ourselves. What the Ukraine war, exactly 45 days back, it was not as critical. Today, after 45 days, we know if you are not self-sufficient, you're not strong, you can be run over. And I think this is one learning which makes the stance of the government even stronger, the resolve even stronger, that we need to do it right here, even if there's, call it on the slang, 19-20 kind of a capability, bit of a shortfall over what we ideally want. And this is one communication we constantly heard from the CDS.
Correct.
If 95%, it's fine with me.
Very valid points over there. And taking it forward with you, Captain Kanwar. So, you've just heard how India should be Atmanirbhar when it comes particularly from the fighter jets. Now that we have had 3 indigenous lists, is that the way India is moving? First to become Atmanirbhar with fighter jets?
Yeah. So let me take this answer to this question from the value chain. Now, if you look at the entire defense industry value chain, which starts from R&D to upgrade to innovation, then manufacturing, system integration, and finally the MRO part. Now, in the entire value chain, where we are right now, if you look at a baseline, there are mixed successes, like was Mr. Jayant rightly brought out. In the naval and the land domain, we are stronger. We are not really strong on the aerospace side, and we are getting strong. I think the point which I mentioned earlier, the strategic partnership with the government is looking at for fighter aircraft, for a submarine, for a armored FRCV fight, a tank, and also for the naval utility helicopter. Now, these 4 big ticket platforms are very essential for what Mr. Jayant just said, for the country to leapfrog into a country which is more on the product side or product development at a platform level. We are very good today at system, subsystem, and on the product level, license production. Moving away from license production, where we have an absorption of transfer of technology, we are able to imbibe, not only produce items on build to print, or we get into build to specification and go beyond that.
Right.
Is what is the need of the hour.
Absolutely.
And I think this is where the anchor companies like Mr. Jain's company,
Right.
Tata Info, Tassel, or even the public sector like Bharat Electronics or HL could play a huge role if they kind of build this ecosystem of absorbing technology and creating these islands of excellence around the country. The last point what I want to mention is Mr. Jain is absolutely right. Both the Ukraine war and even to extend the Armenia-Azerbaijan conflict proved one point. If you're not self-reliant, if you do not manufacture your own equipment, your own weapons and sensors, it is a misnomer to bank on anybody else. It could be any, in this multipolar world, the way the world order is emerging right now, I think it is very, very important. And that is where we really appreciate MOD's and the government's initiative towards being self-reliant. And the sooner the better.
Absolutely.
That's the buzzword.
Absolutely, it is. Mr. Kanwar, Mr. Patil, thank you so much, both of you, for taking time out and sharing with us those in-depth insights into what's happening with the defense space. Good to talk about that.